You're listening to the Forest School Podcast. Delicious waffle chat about education, nature connection, child development, community building, and lots more. Hosted by Lewis Ames and Wem Sutherland.
Sure. Hi listeners, hi and welcome. We are so glad to be here today with Sarah Ockwell-Smith, the author of many books about gentle parenting, about different parenting issues, parenting children of different ages. But we've invited Sarah here today. She's very kindly accepted to talk with us about her latest book, Because I Said So, which, yes, Lewis is showing it
Listeners
here.
can enjoy it. This is all my clicky notes.
Oh yeah,
These
Lewis has filled it full of
that's a good
post-it
point
notes.
sticker.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, it's good. No, don't be scared. That's good. That's like, oh, let's talk about that. Oh, that's juicy. That's what those post-it notes indicate. But but Sarah, this book is fundamentally it's about this idea of childism, isn't it? And about how our society is childist. You know, obviously in the book, and of course, listeners, we'd recommend that people, if you're interested in this and you want to find out more, to buy the book and to have a really thorough read through. But you really eloquently explain what childism is in the book and give us lots of examples. But for listeners who might be listening now and it might be the first time they've ever heard this term, they're really unaware of it, could you give us a bit of a précis in a nutshell of what is meant by childism?
It's just simply children are discriminated against by adults based on their age. So not too dissimilar to sexism, where women are discriminated against for being women and treated differently by society in the same way that we treat children differently. We talk about ageism quite a lot, but we only ever talk about it in relation to older people. So as a society, we accept that the elderly are often treated badly based on their age, but we would never consider that children are treated poorly based on their age. And it's such a huge subject when you start, peeling back the layers of the onion and seeing quite how poorly we treat children in so many different ways. And I don't just mean when we discipline them or if we tell them off for something. It goes through to a governmental and a political and a historical level. And it's just everywhere, and we just don't talk about it. And when you do, this book came out in September, and I got so much hate and so much ridicule from so many people who were like, "Don't be stupid. Children aren't discriminated. They're spoiled rotten. They get everything they want." And the biggest problem is because we were all children, we've all experienced it, and that means a lot of people just are blind to it.
That's so interesting. I really wanted to speak with you about that, and it was one of the questions that I wanted to bring up because. In your book, you explain how most of us, we have to face up to the fact that this has also happened to us and it's become internalized. Do you think that, why do you think it's so sad to hear that you've experienced hate for speaking up about this issue that you're passionate about and just opening people's eyes to it? Why do you think that people are reacting in such a sort of triggered way?
I think twofold. I think obviously they are being triggered and they don't realise. So you'll get the sort of older generation who would say, I got a good spank in the day, and that's what children today need. They're out of control. We don't have control over them anymore. And actually, they're agreeing with me. They're saying that the way that we treat children is controlling. But what they're also saying is, as a child, I was really damaged. The people who loved me the most hurt me. And the people that I should have trusted, I couldn't really trust, and I've grown up like this. So they just don't realise that the cognitive dissonance is too strong and it's too ingrained to really see it and understand it. And I think a lot of people conflate it with mollycoddling or spoiling children, particularly with material things. So I say, kids today have got everything they want. They've got toys and holidays and all stuff like this that I didn't have.
Right.
So how could they possibly be treated badly?
Yeah, so they're kind
and
of like...
same, with all the gentle parenting, it's all, this is woke, this is stupid, this is political correctness. When's it ever going to end? Another ism to talk about.
One of the things that's always landed with me really well is I think it's Alfie Kohn who in his writing about different things and unconditional relationships, and he posited that it sounds similar to this. He was like, people have internalized that their parents loved them, and therefore everything that their parents did was the way that you show someone you love them.
Yeah.
And to unpick that there was something dissonant about that idea is really is I don't want to call it a stumbling block, but that's a way that lots of people have created their narrative.
And I think it's worse because we tend to sort of subconsciously repeat what our parents did to us with our own children. So there is an awful lot of people who have treated their children in ways that I've called out as childish in the book. And it really hurts when somebody's saying, actually, this isn't very nice. It's not great for the child. It's not very respectful. It could have been harmful. And nobody ever wants to hear that. And I think the worst thing is most parents, not all, but most, want to do right by their children. So they'll follow advice from family, friends, the internet, medical professionals, parenting books, and they think they're doing it for the best. And then along comes somebody like me who says, actually, I don't think it was for the best. You may have caused damage. And it's just much easier to attack me and attack what I'm saying than to consider, actually, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I did hurt my kids.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely living in an age where people are, I mean, parenting books have been around for a long time, and you talk about a lot of those in your book, and about the kind of advice and viewpoints of very outdated, usually male, sort of child experts or parenting experts who are saying you must always do this and you must always do that. You know, that's been around for a while, but in terms of the breadth and variety of parenting books that you can get hold of now at the click of a button or from the library or whatever, obviously people are spending more of their time thinking about parenting, reading about parenting, and it almost becomes tribal, doesn't it? That it's, oh, I align with this, or this book really saved my life and things. So if people, as you're saying, hear something that conflicts with that,
absolutely,
they can feel very threatened, can't they? Because they're so, people are so desperate. And if they've done something,
I say in the book, I did control crying with my child. I did the naughty step with my child. I did all of these things because people told me they were the right thing to do. And then when I realised they weren't, it really hurt.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to sit with.
I think similarly, when people, so I was taking this book, and obviously I am a parent, and I was taking lots of parenting, thoughts away with me, but I was also thinking that so my house is littered with all of your gentle parenting books. My wife is a very big fan, but this one struck me as one that was slightly different, because it was one that I felt more easily aligned with, like, oh, I can take this into my professional practice. There's ideas.
I don't think
here.
It's a parenting book. I didn't ever mean it to be a parenting book,
which is super interesting. But then it also maps onto when people ask me about my time teaching, I, similar to you talking about the controlled crying and stuff, and I think back about things that I did as a teacher that were behavior management, or that at the time I was like, this is what I'm doing, I'm holding the line, I'm following the behavior plan. And now when I think back at my teaching time, I'm actually filled with like lots of regret, lots of like, God, if only. But then you can always do that, can't you? You can always look back and go, God, if I knew what I'd known now, I could have done better last year, or I could have done, did you, so like you said, this is definitely one that's not a parenting book. Have you had feedback from different audiences that you weren't connecting with the gentle books?
Yeah, a lot of teachers, actually, because I think, again, I think there's a really anti-teacher message that surrounds gentle parenting, and anti-schooling message. And I'm really not anti-schooling. I think people should have choices, however they want to educate their child. And I really passionately believe that schooling should be suited for children as well. I think it is a right that they should have it as an education, and it should meet their needs. But I think it's so often so whether it's gentle parenting, I have a Facebook group, or on my Instagram account, it really quickly descends into a bun fight and an attack on teachers. And I was just really wanted this book to be like, my eldest is a teacher, my oldest son is a teacher, he's just finishing his PGCE, so obviously I've been hearing it from his perspective as well. But I feel that teachers and those who are passionate about education and children as part of sort of the victims as well as the children, it's not the teacher's fault, it's the government's fault, it's the politicians' fault, it's who they employ as their behaviours are, whoever they take advice from, it's Ofsted, it's the whole like nasty toxic system that surrounds it. And I just really wanted teachers to know, do you know, I actually really am on your side. And I also really understand how difficult it is when you have somebody following gentle parenting who comes in and says, oh, you're doing this, this, and this, and I don't like this part of the discipline policy. I want you to change it. And realizing how impossible it is for them to change it, because it's not something that they can do. And as you say, if you're in a class full of 30 kids and you've got to teach to a syllabus and you've got all these metrics to tick off, you can't teach in the way that you would want to. And that doesn't mean that they're not gentle or that they're horrible people or that they're disrespectful of children. They're just caught up in the same cycle and cog as we are. And I think, so yeah, it was really nice that it reached a lot of people in education, because I really wanted to just make it very clear that I know that some gentle parents are very anti-mainstream education and very anti-teachers, but I'm really not.
Yeah, you kind of understand that people go into that job because they want the best for children and they care about children.
Well, you don't go into it for the money and the hours or anything, do you?
Exactly. Yeah. But exactly that. And so you have to, understand that that's certainly one of the reasons that I left teaching, because it changed so much in the time that I was teaching in secondary over about 9 years, that by the time I left, I didn't feel morally comfortable with the things I had to get the kids to do, or the way I had to treat the children in order to get the results that was expected of, not just my boss, but their boss and their boss, and ultimately the council and the government, as you say. And I knew that what literally I was doing and I was saying was potentially damaging to the children's mental health, and that's fundamentally one of the reasons that I left. Because
and then ironically, we also talk about let's improve their mental health, and you're like, are you joking? We do everything to destroy it up until this point. And if they do have mental health problems, our child and adolescent mental health services are so overstretched and underfunded that they can't get the help that they need. When it's a political issue. Basically, for the last 5 years, I've been volunteering for Citizens Advice, and every week I work with parents who can't afford to feed their children, can't afford to clothe their children. And I don't think a lot of people realise how bad things are in this country when it comes to whether it's teaching, whether it's the state of our mental health support services for children, or whether it is just simply poverty and how many children are growing up in poverty. And having a government that doesn't fix that is one of the most childish things, I think. You can have all the gentle parenting you want, but if you're growing up in poverty, it's going to affect you.
Yeah. Can we touch on the government's attendance campaign a little bit? We mentioned that in a previous episode of our podcast, and I know that it's something that you've picked up on as well. I've seen it on your social media, because I think that is, a prime example of the government just getting it so wrong, isn't it? And for people who haven't heard about it, it's the campaign that has a photograph of a child and it says, they were worried about school this morning, but look at them now. And there's a teenager, happily smiling. And the argument is that it's extremely ableist, it's extremely short-sighted, that it's not taking into account, it's basically telling parents, isn't it, to ignore their instincts about how their child is, override the child's mental health, force them to mask, force them to pretend everything's okay. It's just so, toxic.
I think this comes back to a lot of what schools and the government end up having sort of focus on, which is how can we either punish or reward them to get them to be in line with what we want, but they so rarely say, what's the problem here? Why are they struggling? What can we do to make things easy? Are we causing some of the struggle? And actually, yes, they are. But then, no, they come up with this stupid campaign and, fines if your child is persistently absent, or school inclusion officers who are working to have to go and do home visits to get the children back and blaming the parents as well as the children. We need to look at the underlying reason. Why can they not be in school? Why are they disengaging? Is that because they've got emotionally based school avoidance, or is that because the parents haven't been supported and the parents are really struggling and the child not attending is a knock-on effect of that?
Yeah.
But in all of that, their children again are let down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It speaks as well to there's a large section of this book where you go through the different ways that people exert control and the fear of God to style parenting, which is that I was just looking at that. I was just double checking before I went through, and you've got in here that 60% of parents said that they did fear of God, make themselves big and shouting on purpose. I would, but that was so like. I believe that 60% of people have done it. I believe probably 80-90% of people have done it. It was the intentionality bit of it that really shook me as like, and again, that kind of relates back to, I know that's a very teachery thing to do where you go, well, today I need to wear, and we were talking about this in a podcast a few weeks ago.
My son's literally just had training on this, how to control the room, and it comes down to you and the way that you speak and move. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. But so we have interesting conversations when he comes home from training.
Oh, I bet.
I bet. Imagine.
Because I was going to say, it absolutely reminds me of teaching. Is that kind of like, I just, as you were talking, I was remembering kind of turning to the cupboard, back from to the classroom and going, right, I don't feel angry at all about this issue, but I'm going to pretend to be angry now. Here's my big voice. Now you will do what I say because of the pressures that are on you to, and that, I can hear my class being really rowdy and somebody's going to come in and tell me off. And oh my goodness, it's a cycle,
we know that it doesn't work as adults. Like if we've got a boss who is constantly shouting at us, we're not going to listen to them. We won't respect them. We won't work well for them. But if you have a boss who values you and listens to you and hears you out if you've got issues, then you act better.
Yeah.
It's really not rocket science. It's so simple.
One of the things that I made a note of was that I think sort of student to student relationships and the community building that's gone on in our setting, the list of discipline styles of yelling and fear of God and all those things really made me reflect on. I think that we have seen the biggest increase in cohesion the more we have both internalized, where my hope I'm all right, because I haven't checked with you that this is true, that we have internalized, but also that we have, fingers crossed, that we have said out loud, I can't make you do anything. But that there's something about, one part is us internalizing that and going, we don't actually have any power here, and shedding all of that. Okay, well, I can get them to if I yell, or I can get them to if I stand here, or I can give them a solution and a facial expression that lets them know that is really what they should do. All of that stuff. We've just binned all of that, but also verbally saying out loud. And I did it the other day. There was a disagreement over, it was like a swing or something. Somebody was using the swing and then they changed hands and all this stuff. And all I was doing was being there and going, well, it sounds like this person's saying this. Well, it sounds like this person's saying this. Sounds like this person. But I said a few times, and they were going, but we don't want to get off. And I was going, well, I can't make you get off. I'm not going to grab you. I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to make you do anything. And I think I've realized that when there are issues around things like that, there are disagreements in the way people are feeling or the way they're seeing things, it's almost like before, when we were like, okay, we're in power and control and we will mediate what happens and tell them the outcome, that as soon as there moves towards a disagreement, they almost go into lawyer mode. Like they go into like, okay, I've got to petition the grown-up because the petition's that the grown-up's in charge. I must make my case and I must make it passionately and I must say everything that I can, even if it's not true, or do these things. And like, the more we've kind of gone, well, I can't make you do anything, the more people go into these disagreements and these mediation bits with like, okay, well, I'm physically safe, I'm emotionally safe. This is just a process now that we go through. And like, so just that was just a reflection I had going through all those discipline things.
That's why parenting goes so wrong when they reach teenage stage. So my book that I've got out this year is about raising teenagers from 13 to 21. And you might be able to raise little children with fear, control, coercion, fear of God, dominance. But when that child is bigger than you, I'm only 5'1", my kids are all 6 foot. I can't control them. I can't pick them up and put them on a step or something. You have no control at all when they're twice your size and they look and speak like an adult. And I think this is where it goes so wrong, that you realise very quickly you can't parent through control and coercion when they're out there and they're teenagers. The only way forward is to listen to them, treat them as equals, and focus on your relationship, and then do what I call constantly throughout the book, which is being the adult. And I don't mean be the adult as in be controlling. I mean be the adult who's emotionally regulated and who every time takes a breath and thinks, right, I might want to yell, but actually, what do they really need at this moment in time?
Yeah.
And the genuinely is the only way through when you've got bigger children, because they're not scared of you anymore. And so many people who use that fear and control and dominance when their children are younger struggle in the teen years because they've got nothing left.
It doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
Well, also, and it sets up, and I said to some children the other day that had a disagreement and one had shoved the other one over to get something, and I just went, well, I can't run a space where it's just whoever is biggest is in charge. I can't run. Oh, that's not how we, we can't all be in a community where that's the case. But and that, like, again, just verbalizing all that stuff out loud and getting it through of like you say, the tool sort of falls off pretty sharply in terms of its usefulness. Yeah.
But it is the more we step in and control, the less chance they have to resolve things themselves. So they don't learn how to resolve things. I'm often asked about sibling relationships and what do you do to stop them fighting and stepping in all the time. And I think people are really shocked when I say I really don't step in very much. They have to learn to sort it out themselves, which is, I don't think, what people want to hear. But every time we do step in and control it for them, we take that opportunity away that they resolve it by themselves. I'll step in if safety is at risk, like if a big one's going to clobber a little one. But otherwise, you've got to be able to trust them.
There's a part in here, I was just looking through, and it's like this assumption that children have the tools to soothe or regulate all of their own problems. That just by leaving them, they will have the tools to self-soothe their hunger. That they will have the tools to, self-soothe their emotional, turbulence. And again, I think that's a really important thing, like you're saying, isn't it? Of just like being there for certain types of safety, but not control. Is that?
I know, we'd be there as a sounding board to talk things through and maybe give suggestions, but it's, you have to be regulated and you have to help them. You role model that to them, and then you can help them with suggestions.
Can I pick up on
more
that?
that you can do?
Yeah, can I pick up on that a bit? Because a lot of your work is about the parent. It begins with you in the whether it's parent or childcare worker, anyone who's kind of around children and responsible for their well-being. That self-regulation is really key, and that, as you say, taking a deep breath and thinking about how you're acting towards them, and therefore what behaviour and reaction you might expect from them, having talked to them in a certain way or behaved a certain way yourself. I wonder if we could have a conversation there about, so especially for people who might really struggle with that themselves for whatever reason. Maybe it's that they're really trying hard to be a bit of a cycle breaker, that they've had a really difficult childhood with parents that were very reactive, were not able to self-regulate, and they'd had kind of suffered that throughout their childhood. Or whether they're really struggling in other ways in their lives. You mentioned poverty and having a difficult time, and that it's going to be those parents, or it might be because of neurodiversity, for example, or mental health problems, that we might really want to do a particular style of parenting that isn't childish and that is respectful. But when we find it so hard to regulate ourselves, where have you got any examples about sort of places that people have been to help them with that, or strategies? Or
I think we have to start from basically the first point, which is, I think that you've just described everybody. Everybody struggles to regulate for whatever reason. We're living in really difficult times. We are mostly from generations that were very childish and very authoritarian in their upbringings. By no means are probably my own upbringing and your upbringing's the same as if you've been born in the 50s, 60s or 20s. Things have got better, but they are still, as we said earlier, 60%, the main style of parenting is through control and fear of God. Depending on what research you read, 40 to 60% of parents in the UK still smack their children. So while you may believe in the media that gentle parenting is the main style of parenting, it's absolutely not. It's a tiny fringe movement. Authoritarian, controlling parenting is still the main. And I think most parents today who are trying to be calmer and kinder and more compassionate, we have to understand that that's how we were raised. So we're all breaking cycles. We are all living under, in a society that is unsupportive of parents, of young families, of children who expect, I talk in the book about the new childcare funding and how I think what a lot of people don't realise about it, one, it's the funding is not there. It's not what it's been spun to be. But what we need to understand is why it's there. It's there because they want us to go back to work as soon as possible. They don't want parents to stay home and look after their children. They want everybody, mothers and fathers, everybody who has children, back at work by 9 months at the latest. And it's really impossible to raise children, to work on your own baggage, be a cycle breaker, pay your mortgage, pay your rent, pay your bills, and also raise children and work full time. Because if you don't work full time, what's going to happen is universal credit is going to be cut, because there will come a point in a year or so where you're going to have to go to work for 30 hours a week when you've got a 9-month-old. And all of this is a big melting pot. We don't have support networks around us. We don't have aunts and uncles and grandparents. We tend to live very isolated from our family, and it's really bloody hard. The internet is a great tool sometimes, but it also, that adds to making you feel worse, because there's constant comparison and constant, am I good enough? And even ironically, books like mine, I think would be better if there were no parenting books at all, and we just could trust our instincts and chat with our friends. But I think we've got this big melting pot of difficulty when we're parents, whoever we are. Some people have it worse. I have a book called How to Be a Calm Parent, when I talk about I have really poor health a few years ago, and that made it really difficult. I have a child who has ADHD, and that was awful because we were getting no support from that. So yes, sometimes it's harder for some people, but I'm also very fortunate because I've got a nice house. I'm white, I'm straight, so I have a lot of privilege there, but we're all going through shit. And we all lose our shit. And I regularly lose my shit. And I think it's really important that people understand, I try and be really good, the best I can be, the most of times, but we're all juggling so much stuff that it's impossible. And we will sometimes lose it. So I talk about, carrying a bucket full of stuff. And we're all so up to the brim that sometimes all it takes is one small thing and we drop it all out. So I think we do all need to try and be better. We need to try and be cycle breakers and blah, blah, blah. But I think we've also got to be really kind to ourselves and start there and lower the bar and the expectations and try to be good enough and accept that we will screw up. And when we screw up, the most important thing is that we apologize. And I think apologizing to children is one of the most unchildish things that we can do, because, I didn't have an apology from any adult when I was growing up. And I presumed that everything was my fault. I wasn't good enough. But the power of an adult, particularly an adult you respect, saying, I'm really sorry, I screwed up. You did not deserve that. Okay, I'm not happy that you did X, Y, and Z, but that's irrelevant. You didn't deserve the response you got from me. And I'm really sorry. It was about me, not you at all. And the power that has is so much more powerful than having some unachievably uber zen calm parent who frankly would be terrifying. It doesn't teach a child anything, does it? You just think, oh my God, I could never live up to how amazing my mum and my dad is. I think it upsets me when people say, oh, gentle parenting is toxic for parents. It's like if you're not naturally calm and don't have naturally calm children, it's really hard and it makes you feel bad. And I'm like, it's not, and I've never said that. And actually, I don't believe, and I know you sound quite negative, I don't think we are the generation who are going to change everything. I think we are the generation as parents who are going to introduce the change that our children will change next generation. And then we're just playing our part. If we manage to get better, 10% better than the previous generation, that's a massive change. We don't have to do everything all at once.
That's so nice to hear all of that encapsulated, and I also hope that everybody can take all that stuff on board. One of the quotes that I wrote down was, it was about emotional regulation and things, and it's learning that they're only lovable when placid and calm.
Yes.
Which is obviously something that we're all kind of like, maybe to different levels of conscious or subconsciously aware that, and again, just to, it's that unconditional parenting thing of like, do you genuinely show the same responses when they are doing antisocial versus pro-social behaviors and all those things? And one of the things that I wondered, and I saw a parallel, like you're saying about these generations, it's going to be the next one and the next one, and I saw a real parallel there for there's something about children sort of being subconsciously shown that is the behavior that makes you a good and lovable child. But then I also thought, well, there's also ripples of that when you get into the adult working world, which is this idea that, like, if you are emotionally charged, you are not professional or respectable, in a way that I think is used to, well, I guess, control people that are good at controlling their emotions and who don't get passionate about projects or injustices in the workplace or how particular things are going. They're in some ways seen as, well, that's the professional response. It's the poker face and the thing. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about, like, the ripple of, if we, like you say, if we have this generation of children now who are, more of them are shown that, having emotional responses doesn't change how they are respected and seen and valued.
It's ironic, isn't it? We talk about mental health and it's good to talk and stuff, but when people show emotions, we don't like it. And particularly as a woman, we're emotional. We're told to calm down, stop being so emotional or hysterical, or like hysteria comes from the womb. It's us as a woman that gets hysterical. And I think there's a lot of sexism linked up in that. But then there is also with the whole sort of toxic masculinity of be strong, man up. I've got 3 boys, and I realized very quickly that 90% of their T-shirts would have stupid phrases like literally little man written on them or little soldier or something. So we teach them from very early on, actually, it's not good to talk. But then when they're 20 or 30, then we're desperately trying to make them talk. I don't know. It's, I mean, I've been self-employed for 25 years now. I don't think I could work. Certainly not. I was in sort of a big blue chip corporate world, and I couldn't do that now. I couldn't hold my tongue.
But that's so interesting, isn't it? Like, I'm just interested in that thing of, like, we find these circles where we are safe to show our feelings and safe to have these conversations and things like that. And it's like, oh, well, what will it look like when these generation of children, when they are in the workforce and when they are professionals, will they be changing that corporate image of, like, like you say, of that's the status quo.
I mean, I guess if they grow up and they think that their feelings and their voice matters, then yes, they're more likely to. And again, I find it really sad that sort of people who aren't really on board with the idea, or older generations, find that disrespectful. They're troublemakers.
Yeah.
They don't like people who stand up and speak out.
That's
what our world needs, isn't it? More troublemakers.
I've been told that in the workplace myself. You're difficult. You're just difficult, aren't you? And you're very angry. It's like, maybe that is also why I'm now.
We should clarify, that's not from me. That's not, when I work together, that's not like throwing me under the bus.
No.
Every time I have an article in the Daily Mail, I can literally do a countdown to somebody says, what an angry, nasty woman.
Oh, wow.
The angry woman trope is just like, a guarantee, give it an hour and somebody will reply that.
Yeah.
Sarah, I wanted to ask, one of the metaphors that's in this book that has been genuinely the most helpful for me is there's part of the book where you're talking about privacy and the rights of children in terms of their photos and videos of them. And I hope correct me if I'm wrong in paraphrasing, you're talking about this idea that, like, we as adults have a reasonable right to privacy inside our homes. Once we're in public, we don't, because that's, public space. That's why photography and stuff in the UK, at least, is legal in public places. But you sort of highlighted that experience of children and going, well, they for a lot of the time don't have that right to privacy or expectation.
They have GDPR. They have exactly the same rights as us.
Yeah,
and they have the right to erasure and the right to be forgotten. But they don't know that. They're not aware of their rights, and parents manage it for them, and we overshare hugely.
Yeah, and that idea, and so you're then talking about how much gets shared and how much people are aware of what seems like funny, or what look what they did on the toilet today. Look at this little song. That stuff seems benign, but the metaphor that you used was comparing it to assisted living situations and saying, and I think particularly you were talking about those video clips sharing, whatever they are, where it's like, what's my toddler crying about today, or reasons my toddler's upset.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I did an Instagram post on it, and you would never say it to somebody, an adult in a care home.
Yes, and that
I cried because I had the wrong colour cup.
But flipping that, and I've had this conversation with a few different people now where I've gone, I was reading this book and they compared it to, assisted living, where someone is going through that, and you can just see people going, oh yeah. So for people that haven't, we've just garbled a lot of that metaphor, but you were saying in the book that, like, if you had someone, being in a childcare role is not that different to being in an assisted living support worker role. You're caring for someone with different mental capacity or ability and different emotional regulation. But we are way too quick in a lot of cases to share things that have upset a toddler in a way that, like you say, you wouldn't share.
We share it because we find it funny.
Yeah.
And we're laughing at them.
Well, so this is one thing that I really want to talk about, because I love the metaphor. And then Wem and I were talking this through, and we were talking to someone who is a retired ambulance driver, paramedic. And we were saying about how do we find the balance between wanting to have spaces where we can share, because some of that sharing of my toddler's upset and crying about this thing, I genuinely believe that some of that comes from a place of like, can everyone else just reassure me that I'm doing everything I can, and that this person, this person is upset, and that your children also get upset.
Sometimes they
things.
do things and it is genuinely really funny, and you want to share it with those people you love because you thought it was sweet and funny.
Yeah, definitely. And we were trying to say, well, and paramedics are another one where I've known a few paramedics through my life, and they have the darkest sense of humor that I've ever known as a coping mechanism for the work that they do. You have to. But they are all really great at going, I have these jokes with other paramedics, and I don't, that's the space where we all cope, but we don't bring that into the public space. And I was thinking, oh, there's a metaphor there perhaps, which is like, how do we hold parenting spaces where we can talk about how difficult things are, and how, the blue cup was the wrong cup today, and isn't that hard, and do your kids do it? But without the mockery aspect of it.
Don't share photos is the first thing, isn't it? I would share photos of my children. I mean, my children are now young adults, teenagers, and in their 20s. But when they were younger, I would share photos, but on a very private Facebook account with a very few people that I literally just knew them in person. And then as soon as my children got old enough to say, don't take a picture of me, I didn't take a picture of them. And if they said, don't share that, or are you going to share that on Facebook? I said, well, would you want me to? And from 5 or 6, they could tell me, please don't share it, or do share it. So, I think, you have to, if you were going to take pictures of another adult, you probably ask their permission to share them. Well, then asking the child's permission, but also making them aware of the right to erasure, the right to be forgotten. So if there is something online, I went back a couple of years ago and took off everything I could find on the internet of my children that have been shared publicly, and making them realize that actually that can be, you do have a right to take that down. But I think it's difficult when you're parents and you're just well-meaning and you want support or you want to share cute things. I think that what I really struggle with, like the influencers, the parenting influencers, who share these things when their children, there's sometimes the sweet things, but sometimes the really vulnerable things, and the children are content, to make money. And using the analogy we've just spoke about with you, if you had your granddad living with you and he had dementia, would you use him as content to make money and to sponsor a pair of adult incontinence pants instead of a packet of Pampers? We would just think that's horrendous. And I think the biggest ticking time bomb is the whole influencer, the parenting influencer, the videos, the Instagram posts, when those kids in 10, 15 years' time see what was created for them, what identity was created for them, and what was shared about them. I think,
Do you think there'll be legal cases and things like that?
There already have been legal cases. There already have been landmark legal cases, but I think there's going to be a lot more. And I think at some point there's actually going to have to be a law about what parents are able to share of their children. I think there will be a law that stops parenting influencers making money from their children. There has to be.
It's very interesting. Do you think there's any, you give that example about like you wouldn't do that with your elderly relative. And there's some times where I think we don't kind of stop to think about what we're doing when we share images of our children. And I wondered if that is partly because when they're children, we sort of almost see them until they get to a certain age, almost like an extension of us. Like they're such an extension of us that sharing a photo of them is the same as sharing a photo of ourselves almost. It's like this other human is so part of me and so close to me that the boundary is hard to feel almost.
Well, also there's something professional though, isn't there? Where I think you could also apply that to people who run childcare settings. I think you could probably apply that and say that they might see photos of children at their setting as an extension of like, that's my setting. I'm showing off my setting, not necessarily considering that those people are taking part in an activity at your session, sure, or at your nursery or whatever else, but the mindset, similar to like you're saying, when that children are an extension of their parents, but also the children are an extension of the nursery or of the school. Here but they all are.
Just like if you were at work, if your work came in and had a photographer in because they were going to have a brochure advertising your place of work, you would have to sign a consent form to allow your image to be used. And why do we not ask children to do that?
Yeah.
And again, this comes back, I think, to what Wen was saying. We actually don't ask the children, we ask the parents to sign it.
Yeah.
So it is the whole, well, the parent owns the child and the child's image, but they don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really tricky. I've really scaled back sharing images of children full stop in everything I do. If I do share an image, then it will be very rare. It'll be a stock image from the back or like a tiny baby looking very cute who's not identifiable. I'd like to get to a point where I don't use any images at all of children for anything. But that's, I don't know, it's really difficult. And it's not about shaming parents. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I think we need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
Oh, can I jump on then? Because you've just said the magic word there, which is it's not about shaming parents, which is almost the whole back third of this book is you don't have to be in every internet argument. You don't have to be there correcting everything you see at the back. That is so reassuring, as like you say at the start of this book, there's all this stuff of you have been a victim of childism, sorry, this is going to be a difficult read, and then the back of the book is kind of like reassuring you. Partly there is a bit where you go, guess what, you're going to get abused because you're anti-childism, which thanks for that, but there's the whole back of this book is you don't have to be in every argument. You don't need to change
to save the world. It's enough to just do your own
massive
stuff.
And that is so massive. I wondered, was that something that you really felt needed to be in like just this book? Is that something that you wanted to put in all your work going forwards? Where's that, as an idea?
I think it's mostly like from my experience, I guess, that I sort of reached the point of burnout. For if you work in a field, and it's similar to the paramedics, if you work in a field where you're considered to have empathy and to be kind and nice, then a lot of people will take advantage of you. It's difficult to say no when people ask you for help because you're in a helping profession. And I can't tell you how many people email me or message me privately on social media asking for help every day. 50. And I would try to answer all of them. And I've just realized, I really can't. I feel like I do enough. And it took a long time for me to be happy with, I feel I do enough. And I feel that I have a right to feel space to breathe and to feel safe and to be able to say no, somebody else can do that. Because if you don't, you will reach a level of burnout that ironically, what happens to me is I get sick, which I am at the moment, but what happens is I get so full up and so angry that actually all my family just get all the shit that I've been bottling up because I've been trying so desperately to help other people. And I think we have to just start with what we do in our family. And if we feel full up, we say no. We don't get more involved. We have boundaries, so we're not taking things on. And yeah, I think in the work I've since 20 years, I've been working sort of helping professions in some way. And you have to have boundaries. You have to say no. You have to realize you can't do everything. Otherwise, you are no help to anybody.
I think that's really going to...
Maybe I haven't said it enough with what I was writing, but it was really important that I said it with this one.
Yeah. I think that will really resonate for a lot of people who listen to this podcast. So thank you for saying
that applies definitely to the alternative education provision. You know, you could map that fully onto, you know, if you're in alternative education, you believe something that's a bit radical, and therefore you are going to see different things that you might need to go for. I really wanted to ask, in the book you talk about like not shaming parents because they will essentially like close the shutters and double down on what they're doing, and that's not the way to get people. And the phrase you use is to show up and support them. And I wondered if I could sort of get your take on, so this book, although it's not a parenting book, the examples there are, you're a parent, you see another parent doing something at the park, you see another parent doing something in public, and there's in some ways like a level playing field there. You're a parent of your child, they're a parent of their child. And so in some ways I can see that as kind of showing up to support people kind of thing. And then I was like, one of the things that we always find really challenging is through some of the work that we do and that people that listen to this podcast do, we're trying to show up and support people, but there are hierarchies involved that change how things are perceived. And some of the ones that I thought was with either, you know, we're leaders of our sessions, and those people that come to us are our customers. You know, they are paying us, we are working for them. So that's quite interesting in terms of, well, whose money, and can you know. And then I thought, well, there's people that lead alternative sessions and head teachers, and whether they see a head teacher, you know, how do you show up and support a head teacher who is exhibiting childist, you know, views. And then the last one I thought was us as leaders running sessions and having young leaders with us who are potentially teenagers, and how do you have those conversations? So I wondered if you'd had any, basically just to ask you.
I don't think it's so much conversations. I think you have to start from empathy. You know, why is the head teacher being like that? So I would probably just say, gosh, it's hard, isn't it, doing this? Just, you know, making a difference, and it's really hard. I completely get it. And silly phrase is that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So basically you just be kind to them, empathize with them, let them know that you see what they're going through, give them a hug, whether you're giving a virtual hug or actually giving them a hug. And you'll find a lot of people will change. Like the most angry people will often, oh gosh, somebody else sees it. And you'll often find that they will, I guess, calm themselves down or talk themselves down once you've allowed them to release a little bit. And they themselves will probably say, okay, this isn't how I want to behave. But circumstances or whatever I've brought with me to today is making it really hard for me to be the person I want to be. If you then tell them off or shame them or tell them to do something differently, the shutters are going to come up. They won't listen. You won't get any change. And I think it has to be empathy and connection, as cheesy and hippie and as alternative as that sounds. That is, I think it's genuinely the only way that you can change things.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, I'm really conscious we've had your precious time for a long time, and I want to make sure you're able to get back to your family. But just to kind of round off this discussion, I saw a post that you had on Instagram. You said that a lot of people are asking what they can do. It's a bit similar to the previous question, but what they can do personally to address childism in society. They've seen it, they understand it, and they want to take action, because it can feel quite lonely and isolating when you realise this inherent childism childism in society, and that maybe lots of other people aren't aware of it, and you feel like you are and you want to take action. And you gave loads of great advice in that Instagram post, so I definitely recommend people check it out. But a lot of your answers were about creating and joining community and working together. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, about what people can do collectively when they recognise this childism?
I think it's just trying to be with like-minded people, isn't it? So if you don't have a group locally, a lot of people say, but I have nothing. And then my answer to them is always, why don't you start something? You might not want to start it. I was always the person that had to start these things, but somebody's got to start it. Why not you? If there isn't anything locally, then can you do an online community? I've started a group where people can it's not a group to come and get advice from me. It's just a group where people just can say, this is bothering me, what can I do about it? On a top level, I think you've got things like writing to MPs, lobbying MPs, being careful who you vote for at the general election. And then on a lower level, it's what you do in your family. And I think it comes to looking after your own mental health, because when you start seeing childism, you start seeing it everywhere and you realise how hugely enormous it is. And what I tend to find happens is that people get very passionate and then they try and launch goodness knows how many petitions and marches and writing articles, and they put everything into it and they burn out very quickly. So just little steps that are sustainable are much better than massive big actions. If you want to do the massive big actions, you've got to do them with other people.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for talking to us. I know you're not feeling great and your voice has been croaky.
Yeah. I don't normally sound quite this croaky.
Oh, we really appreciate your time.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
So, yeah. People can obviously find out all of your books on your website. Is there anywhere else that people can go if they've listened to this and they're like, yes, want to find out more, want to do more stuff? Where can they go?
The only other thing I could think of is the group that I've just said. So I have a Facebook group, which is called, I think it's called Because I Said So Childism group or something like that. So there's like 1,500, 2,000. Oh, yeah. So hopefully people get more active in it. I think there's still a reluctance for people to jump in, and it's like, oh, well, let's wait for Sarah to post. But that's my aim, is that people come in there and, maybe one day I won't be in the group anymore, but it's still a group for people to connect and do stuff. I think that's what we need the most.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah. Best of luck with all of the new books, and I can't wait to read the one about teenagers, especially.
Thank you.
That's going to be very, very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Then. Bye.
Thank you to Rachel, Matthew and Andrew, Careful, Gowan, Becca, Rosie, Julie, Rachel, Candice, Claire, Hailey, Louise, Michael and Anna.
And if you want to support this podcast, you can head to patreon.com/The Forest School Podcast. Thanks so much, everybody.